Welcome to Three Righteous Mamas, a podcast brought to you by The Signal. We are on a mission to transform our country. We tell the stories that matter, celebrate the power and hope of pissed off mamas who are building a better future for all of our children. Hi, I'm Cristina Sensun Ramirez.
And I'm Martha Pincoffs. Muna Husseini is celebrating Ramadan right now, so we do not have her with us, and we miss her terribly, but she'll be back.
Yeah, and we are really excited for her to come back and tell all of our guests that don't know a lot about Ramadan, so she can do like a cultural exchange with us. I just wish she was going to bring us all the good food that they break fast with every year.
I know, me too. And Ramadan Mubarak to all of our listeners who are celebrating.
That's right. So we love being in conversation with y'all. We want to remind people to subscribe and leave a review. And Mother's Day, right around the corner, y'all. I'm wearing my Three Righteous Mamas sweatshirt. Just
so cute.
And cute. So go get your alls on our website at threerighteousmamas.com. We have two incredibly courageous guests with us today. Two women that are laying everything on the line to make our community safer. They are Marina Garrett and Hana Senko, that are survivors of sexual assault, that are taking on the power of the district attorney, the Austin Police Department, and local government officials that have turned a blind eye and been derelict of their duty to investigate and prosecute hundreds of cases of sexual assault. And we are grateful to have them with us today to tell their stories and talk to us about what we can do to support them. But before we get into that, and we wanted to warn people, of course, that topic may be difficult for folks to listen to, and of course, understand if people need to not listen or make sure that they're not listening around their kids. So, Martha,
Christina.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you because Muna's not here and you and I are kind of foodies.
Yeah.
Gardening. So I'm like so excited. We had the freeze, which totally killed my winter garden. I had like broccoli, kale, and cauliflower that had totally overtaken my yard. And then it all died. But I've planted amazing spring crops. Like I've become a total mini farmer. I've got corn. Like,
can I come over and cook?
Well, there's no food yet to cook. It's like little.
Okay.
But once it's ready, yes. I have got watermelon. I've got these Indian melons that like grow really well and heat cucumbers, sunflowers, okra, radishes, like, and the story goes on, and it's like so amazing. So I know you're a foodie. Are you not a gardener?
I'm a terrible, wretched gardener, and I cannot be trusted to grow anything, but I can cook the shit out of anything that you can grow. And the summer stuff is like, it's all my favorite, but like, I remember when I started eating seasonally and I can feel my body getting hungry for tomatoes and peaches and watermelon all at the same time. And it's like, oh, I can't wait for it. So I'm going to come over and eat your garden.
Yeah, it's a total conversation starter with all of my neighbors. Like everyone comes by and is like, your yard's looking amazing. I'm like, thank you. And I'm just like so excited to see little things I grew from seed become like a plant. I'll admit too, I'm still not like a fantastic gardener, you know.
Oh, I've seen your yard. It looks really good.
Right now it's okay. I've done raised beds, which is really cool. And the thing I'm most excited about growing, though we'll see, a bunch of people told me it's not going to grow very well, but is corn. And I bought these seeds that are, there were pre-Columbus. They're in changing agricultural norms in the Americas. There were like hundreds and hundreds of types.
Hundreds of varieties.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I've got one that's like called glass corn, which is like rainbow colored, beautiful. So I'm really excited to.
That's so fun.
Grows. And last year I actually also grew peanuts.
You did, and they're roots, right?
Mm-hmm.
We eat the roots.
Yeah, you pull them out of the ground. And eat them.
Peanuts are legumes. They're not nuts. I always thought that they're like in the bean family, not the nut family. That always confused me.
Yeah, I wish I
There's
had
some food nerd for you.
and like just garden all kinds of things. But, I just try, I know like now I've learned for folks that are wanting to learn how to garden, especially COVID is what got me really like fully into it. It's like you learn every season about what grows better and then you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So like last year, cucumbers and melons went crazy at our house and I had so many I was giving them away to neighbors and all kinds of things. In my head, a lot of my neighbors have gotten vaccines. And so we're going to start doing soon, as soon as they get going, like summertime dinners with some of my neighbors is my
Oh,
plan.
fun. That's so fun.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get back to having like
Life.
big dinners. Yeah.
Yeah.
And cooking, I have like kind of burned out on cooking, but I think season change will always get me back into it. But
Yeah. Well, I hope everyone's getting their summer gardens right. And for folks to know it's not too late to start. The amazing thing, right? We live in an incredible part of the country that you can grow crops forever,
year
but
round.
this like is amazing because you can grow stuff all year round. So,
Mhm.
and if you go to follow me on Insta, you can check out my progress.
And also kids eat like I have my kid I've been lucky enough to raise my kids around gardens. They're not one in their house, and they'll eat anything that comes out of the ground if they can see it growing. They're way more
I
adventurous
wish
about what vegetables
like
they'll eat.
into broccoli. I was like, "Mommy grew it. You grew it." And he's like, "I'm not eating that árbol, which is tree in Spanish." So we'll see. But I will have you over since I'm about to get my second vaccine shot and we can do dinner soon. So
That's great. I've had mine, so I'm ready.
good.
This is a trigger warning for everybody. This episode we will be talking about sexual assault and rape. So if that is a trigger for you, or you don't want to listen with kids in the car, go ahead and skip to our next episode. All right. Thanks.
Can you tell us a little bit more about our guests we're going to have on?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about Marina and Hana. They are phenomenal warrior women that we're lucky to talk to today. Marina Garrett was a 19-year-old attending the University of Texas at Austin when she was violently raped downtown by a stranger. Despite getting a rape kit done and reporting to the police, her kit sat on the shelf for 2 years, only for her case to be denied prosecution. Marina knew something wasn't right and began to advocate for survivors, only to discover no cases were going to trial. Shortly after, she joined the federal class action lawsuit against the city of Austin and Travis County. Professionally, she works as an advocate, and much of her free time is spent advocating for the issues as well. Hana Senko is a sexual assault survivor whose rape case was improperly closed via exceptional clearance by the Austin Police Department. She is now one of 12 named plaintiffs who have filed a class action lawsuit against the city of Austin and Travis County DA's office, demanding change and betterment for survivors from our criminal justice system. While Hana serves as a survivor, speaker, writer, and advocate, she is also a devoted wife, mother, and stepmother living in Austin, Texas. I have been lucky enough to get to know these women and doing some work with them, and they are amazing. So let's get to talking. So we will start this podcast the way we start all of them, which is to ask you both, and let's start with Marina. How did your mom or mother figure shape you in the way that you engage with the world?
My beautiful mother shaped me in pretty much every way. I grew up in a single parent household, with mainly my mother around. My stepdad, who was great and adopted me, he came into the picture a little later. But I just, every memory and every piece of just what made me who I am is from my mom. She's terrific. Her and I have the best relationship, and I still lean on her for everything. So, she, even since I was little, like I always remember being called her mini me, and I still am to this day. So,
Hannah, how about you? How about your mama?
Yeah. I think, when I think of mamas, one of the first words that comes to mind is really sacrifice. And I don't think I really understood that until I became a mama myself. And I think there's a part of that that's really cliche, but I also think that's really important. Like when I think back to my mom in childhood, I now can understand how much she sacrificed really, really to keep the family unit together. And I think there's like a lot of emotion around that that's multifaceted. Like it's a beautiful role that mamas take, but it's also really sad in a lot of ways too. Like I've seen her as she's aged, like almost rediscover her identity. And so you realize kind of what she gave up for so many years. And it also comes with the gratitude of realizing like that we kept the family unit intact because of that. And then, there's a patriarchy component too, that now as I've gotten a little bit deeper into, the social justice, the world and the work that we're doing that, brings other emotions into that. So I think it's really sacrifice, that comes to mind when I think of my mom, but it comes with a lot of mixed emotions too.
Mm-hmm. And what are your mom's names? Hannah, what's your mom's name?
My mom's main name is actually Marianne Hannah, which is how I got my name.
Oh, cute.
Yeah.
Mine is Monica K. Garrett. This is my beautiful mother.
Thanks, guys. Okay. So we are talking to Hannah and Marina because they are part of this groundbreaking case to hold the city of Austin and Travis County accountable for hundreds of rapes where no prosecution was brought forth. For folks that don't know, Hannah, could you set the background of the case for us and how this came to be a class action lawsuit?
Yeah, sure. So, really think it's important to understand the context of the situation before the lawsuit even exists. We're looking at numbers that have most recently been identified as really 2 in 5 women in Texas will be, survivors of sexual assault in their lifetime, which is really astounding. But when we bring that really into a lens directly around Austin, there's roughly, we're just going to round some numbers out, roughly 10,000 sexual assaults per year in our city. And we have about a 9% report rate, which means we're getting in just over 1,000 reported sexual assaults every year. And at the end of the day, almost none of those are moving forward with prosecution or conviction or any sort of accountability at the end of it. The lawsuit spells out one year that really identified, I think that in that year there were 9 out of roughly 1,000 that moved forward with either a prosecution or some sort of sex crime related charge. And so it was with that understanding and being someone that went through the system myself, that it's hard not to be outraged. I guess I'll pause and probably hand it over to Marina at this point because I entered the lawsuit secondarily and found out about it after it had already been started. So let me hand it to Marina to talk about maybe the entry of the lawsuit.
Yeah, so I was raped when I was 19 in August of 2015. And at that point, the forensic lab shut down. So I was kind of told that there was no clue when my rape kit would come back with DNA results for my case to move forward. So for 2 years, I just sat there like outraged and confused. And I knew something, like they had already identified him. And I knew that just something was wrong with that. And so I spoke out at a city council meeting in support of the DNA backlog. And I had one of the attorneys reach out to me and asked me after my case had been closed, do you want to move forward? This is not just you. This is not your case. This is, so many survivors in Austin and Travis County that have gone through exactly what you want to go through. Do you want to look into suing these parties to hold them accountable? And I just didn't even think about it before I said yes.
And so I think so many people assume, right, that if someone is raped and they go to the police and they report it, and we know so many times people don't report it for numerous reasons, but that it's going to be investigated, that the perpetrator is going to be held accountable. And that didn't happen in either of your cases. And it's hundreds of women that didn't happen in their cases. So walk us through, what were the police, what was the district attorney telling you during all of this time after you had reported? I can only imagine the trauma of one being raped, then the trauma of reporting it, thinking someone's going to respond, and then there's no response. So can you walk people through what they were telling you and what it was like? Because I think so many people can't even fathom what that has been like for y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was assaulted back in 2006. So it's been quite a while. But I didn't start looking into my experience and really trying to uncover it for personal reasons, working through some relationship issues and trying to understand how much was tied to my assaults, which finally got me from trying to deny this part of me for so long. But in 2017, when I started looking at it, I was like, surely it had gotten better, right? A lot's changed since 2006. But when I started looking into my own case, I realized that, that things hadn't changed and that they, quite frankly, had gotten worse. My situation was one of a date rape type of scenario. I knew the individual. We had been on a prior date and went on a second date where he essentially roofied me or put a drug in my drink. And I lost many hours of my night from that experience. And when I woke up the next morning and basically ran out of the apartment, called a friend, she took me to the hospital. It's a really unique experience going through not only a rape kit experience, but also then engaging with the police in a system that you assumed would be there and treat you differently when you go through it. It was one that I was met with questioning. It is one that you're still trying to get your own sense around. But I think what's even more disheartening, at least for me, was not the experience in those first, 24 hours, but over time. Communication was very thin. Most of the communication and updates on my case was me calling them, to the point that I knew I was being a bother. You just keep picking up the phone and calling and trying to get information, and little information would come back. And to be truthful, I mean, that's about the experience in a nutshell. You go through some pretty intense interviews up front. There are a lot more details that we can get into, whether that is the actual rape kit experience itself, some of the investigative reporting and so forth. But I know for me in my case, my investigation was not nearly as thorough as I would have liked it to have been. And when I finally did get a copy of my police report, I had a lot more questions because I didn't realize these things weren't happening. So let me pause and make space, certainly, for Marina and her experience there.
Yeah. I mean, I called APD when I was getting my rape kit. I called with the advocates there. And APD supposedly came and left while I was getting my forensic exam. They didn't even wait long enough for me to finish the exam to get a statement from me right there the night of. I was called days later to give my statement over the phone. And then was told then a detective would reach out to me. And thankfully, my detective wasn't as victim blaming as, most of the other survivors that I talked to. I don't know if it had any part to do with it, but she did, identify as a woman and I did feel some sense of belief with her. However, that doesn't mean that she thoroughly or adequately investigated my case at all. There were issues the whole time. I was always contacting her. Same thing as Hannah said, it felt like it was made clear that it was a bother that I called so many times. Anytime that information was given to me, it was like only because I called them and they were calling me back did they remember that they had something to tell me. Yeah, and it was, it wasn't like that there was just this really one big moment that was traumatic that they said an awful thing to my face. The entire thing is traumatic. Every time you interact with them just adds another piece of trauma to add on. And then same thing as Hannah, when I got my police report back, I found out even more things that I have questions about, and even more, the way things are written are disrespectful. I found out reading my police reports 2 years later that they investigated the wrong parking garage and didn't know to go back and check until 2 years later. So obviously 2 years later, there's no evidence there. But I mean, how do you investigate the wrong parking garage?
Right.
So it was like, my case was set up to fail before it even started.
So it sounds like in both of your cases that even from the inception of that there's a breakdown for people that don't know, right? There's a breakdown in the police system that investigates rape, that is supposed to work with victims of sexual assault. Then you also had challenges, if we can call that's like generous, at the district attorney level. Like what happened, because they're supposed to investigate, the district attorney is supposed to investigate crimes, keep people safe. And correct me if I'm wrong, in neither of your cases was anyone prosecuted.
Correct. And even more extreme, neither one of our cases were approved for prosecution. So they were shut down, before it even got to the district attorney piece. But to your point, that's absolutely correct. There's a component within the police department that's significant for rape cases or sex crimes of any sort. And it's important that, one, you're believed, that two, that there are approaches around victim care and victim-centered behaviors, trainings, approaches that can be put in place to ensure that victims, one, feel safe. How the information is shared can be significantly altered if you're in a space where you're not feeling safe or believed, as well as the thoroughness of the investigation that happens. For example, my case, it took multiple days before a detective was assigned to my case. It was over 8 days before my perpetrator was even contacted. And, in the end, the witnesses from the night weren't ever contacted. And then on top of it, there's a whole conversation around exceptional clearance. And that has to do with how cases are closed, that really alter how APD presents as to how resolved these cases are, both to city council and to the city as a whole. And that all precedes, right, the district attorney component. And so in order for cases to get handed off to the district attorney, they need to be, have enough evidence essentially to carry forward for prosecution to be considered.
And I thank you so much, both of you, for sharing this with us. It's a lot for us to ask. It is extraordinarily brave and generous of you to do so. And I just feel as white hot pissed off right now as I did when I read the case the first time. It's the only case I've ever read. But in both of your cases, they knew who did it. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any question. There wasn't any mystery around that. That part was solved. And then there was no justice delivered. And the experience that the two of you have had is the experience that, what would you say, 97% of women have when they report a rape?
I would say 99%.
99%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. just the number that make it to court. 97 seems like it's giving prosecution way too much.
Horrific. When I remember when I read the case, I think it was 2017 for the first time. Is that right?
We filed in 2018, right?
2018. So 2018.
Yeah.
There are parts in the case that talk about the culture at APD and the culture at the DA's office, and this culture of victim blaming and dismissal around women who report their rapes. The 9% of women that actually report their rapes, right? Like that's a fraction in and of itself. And I wonder, Marina, if you can speak to, I know that you're in the industry now as an advocate formally. Do you see any shift in that? Is there any way to see that shift change?
I do think that there's just such distrust in the system right now that it's so hard to imagine what that would be. I would assume that, survivors of color right now are having even more difficult time coming forward and reporting to the police than they already have. I think that anyone that pays attention to the news here in Austin and sees this, is not gonna, why would you report when that's going nowhere? I think that the way that we can build that trust back, is showing survivors that they're going to be believed at every level in the process, and that there are other options than just jail once they make it to a district attorney. Because that's not, while we assume that, a lot of survivors report out of fear and out of all of this, some survivors really just don't want to put their entire lives on pause and go through this entire process that takes years and years. And there's just so many options of what justice could look like that I think would bring so many more survivors to the table as far as reporting.
Yeah. So Hana, we are sitting in a place where the case was filed in 2018, and finally this summer, you guys will be heard in front of the Fifth Circuit Court in New Orleans. How did you find each other? Can you walk us through how this class came together?
Yeah, so it's even more complicated. And so I found out about the federal lawsuit, oh my gosh, a few months after it was filed. And joined it originally as a non-named plaintiff because they'd already filed the First Amendment. They didn't want to reset the clocks in any way by adding additional named plaintiffs. So I was a part of it as a non-named plaintiff, really through the whole time of the federal suit. And it was in February of 20, right, Marina, that it got dismissed. The federal suit got dismissed. Which was 8 days before the district attorney election started. And so I'm hard pressed to believe that it was anything other than political. And it was dismissed basically saying, in lack of legal terms, basically, they didn't want to make a ruling on it. There was some suggestion that maybe some of it should have been heard at the state level. Long story short, a two-prong approach was raised to be able to tackle that, was to appeal the federal suit and then also raise a state suit. And so I'm a named plaintiff, the lead named plaintiff in the state suit that was then filed this past year. And then to further complicate legal matters, the defense has requested that the state suit get moved back to the federal court, even though part of their defense was that the federal suit should be heard at the state level. So long story short, we're playing very much in this legal spin. Marina and I met, back in 2018 when I became a non-named plaintiff. And I've been advocating on their behalf, and all survivors' behalf, just like they are, even though I wasn't a named plaintiff in that suit. But it's all been with the understanding that we were, fighting the same fight.
Yeah.
It seems like all of these, the experience, the individual experience in the system with the secondary trauma of being just put off and put off and put off and worked through, and it's almost like they hope you will go away, seems to be similar to the experience of being involved in the lawsuit. It's that if we can just play the game long enough, you'll stop paying attention and go away.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's felt like for me so hard. I now feel a little bit traumatized by city council themselves.
How could you not?
Yeah, exactly. They're doing this. They have the ability to stop this at any moment, but instead they're letting their lawyers toy with us. And so, city council has been added to this list of all of these systems that have hurt me over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like I remember I was watching AOC's live when she came out as a survivor and was talking about the Capitol, October 6th at the Capitol. And she said it feels like when these senators are telling us to just forget that it happened and move on, they're doing it so that they can do it again. And that's just what it feels like to me. So much is that city council and APD want us to just forget that this all happened, and then they can wait a few years and go back to exceptionally clearing cases like they did. Right. And, it feels like that's what they want.
My question too is how you all started to connect and find each other, like the lawsuit, because so much of what momentum there is from change is because you all connected, that you all found power and resilience in each other and showed that while everyone's individual case is so painful and does deserve so much light and attention, that you exposed that it was a systemic issue. And so I'm wondering how you guys even connected, because rape is such an individual, right? Isolated experience. It can feel very isolated experience, how it's investigated. It's how did you guys even all connect? Because there are so many women involved in these cases now.
Yeah. I mean, I attribute mine to the media. I found out about it, through people talking about it through media, and to the point that I was like, let me pick up the phone and just understand what's going on here. And I know every time that we do speak or are in the media, we're reaching somebody. We know that our attorneys continue to get literally hundreds of phone calls. But I also think what's really important to identify is the non-survivors too that we've connected with. Martha's one of them in the sense of, I met Martha through this work. And there's a lot of valuable relationships and friendships that I've developed through it. And survivor or not, having people support us and understand the significance of what we're trying to do is really meaningful and really important in this fight that we're fighting.
And for you, Marina, who've been so involved in this case and one of the first people to speak out at city council, what does winning look like in this case? For people in your position and moving forward, obviously you're speaking out and using your story to also change something for the future. What would it look like for there actually to be a real response that would support victims and address the real violence of
for me, I think it does look a little bit different for each plaintiff, so I don't want to speak on behalf of all of them. But for me, it looks like, both of these lawsuit with the county and with the city making a change that survivors don't feel terrified to report to the police, and that they aren't being told, these victim blaming statements and made to feel like it's their fault and made to not even want to call back to check on their case because they felt like that officer didn't believe me. Why would I keep going with this? You know, it looks like where those things don't exist. It looks like where survivors have an advocate that follows them from the very first time they report throughout the entire system. It looks like so many options at the district attorney's office, that you really get what helps you heal, because that's not happening now. You know, your options are someone goes to jail, to a very inhumane place for the rest of their life, or nothing really happens to them at all, or probation that doesn't feel like enough. You know, there's not options that equal a place where a survivor can feel heard, believed, and that some sort of justice happened and healing can move on, and they can have healing to move on with. So, I mean, I think it takes a lot of collaboration with the systems that we already have. Yeah.
How about for you, Hannah?
Oh my gosh. So, you know, it's so broad. One, I think winning is for the community around us to really understand that rape isn't addressed. You know, I think so many walk around believing that these crimes are being handled and dealt with. And so the awareness and understanding of what the problem really is, not just for Austin, but nationally, I think is really important. I personally would love to see people, you know, want to report, believe in a system so that we're not sitting in a 9% rate, that we have a system that we fully believe in and can trust and know that if we come forward, it's worth it. You know, it's everything from ensuring that these institutions are being staffed properly, to having data transparency, which I think data transparency is really critical in our community understanding what's happening. It does not exist today, and if there was more clarity in what the numbers look like, I think there could be some broader buy-in of how extreme this problem really is. And then it gets down, you know, absolutely to the individuals, you know, just like Marina was saying, you know, victims need to be treated with care. They need to be believed. And even when you flip the coin on the perpetrator side, these are people that need help. You know, many of these people are assaulting again. And so these are people that need help. And it's not just about, you know, locking them up necessarily. It is about ensuring that they're getting the help that they need so that there aren't more victims coming. But it's full spectrum. And the sad thing is that all areas of that absolutely need to be addressed. And so it's not a simple problem, but we first have to recognize the gravity of it.
Well, and I think that it's just so many, including myself, until I was introduced to this case and the work, I walk around thinking, oh, this is something that, you know, is being taken care of. Like, surely we're being taken care of. And like so many things, it is not, and it is certainly not in a way that values our collective humanity. I am curious. I mean, I know the answer to this, but I would love to hear each of you explore it. But how has this, your experience as survivors and your experience as warriors against this system, changed your path? I think there are probably a lot of women listening who are survivors, who certainly every single one of us knows a survivor. But how has this changed you and where you are now and where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, it has completely changed my whole life. I was 2 weeks from starting my sophomore year in college. And I mean, it completely just uprooted everything. You know, I attempted to stumble my way through my trauma for a little bit through college. And that just made things worse and worse, where I was harming, you know, people that I really loved with my actions. And yeah, finally got help and came out and went back to college, and I ended up with a completely different degree than I had gone in with, and have now dedicated my whole life to survivors.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the plan before. I don't know what I would have done with my my original major, but yeah, it definitely wouldn't be here. And I love where I'm at now, and I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, and when I started on this journey, I had no idea that I would be where I am today. It was never the plan. Like I shared, really, I started exploring my assaults out of the need for some personal healing, and trying to understand what pieces of my life could be attributed to that experience. And I quickly kept finding myself in dialogue on it. People, do you want to come talk? Have you thought about this? And very early on, I told myself, look, I'm just going to meet these one at a time and make a decision one at a time, which, if you know anything about me, that is not how I operate at all. I plan everything out,
Hannah can put together the meanest spreadsheet you've ever seen.
Yeah. And so I stepped through this journey, just, looking at every, I'll say, opportunity, every situation that came in front of me, and judged it one by one. Can I handle this? Do I want to do this? Is this the right thing for me? And now, 3 years later, Marina and I are being followed for a documentary that's being filmed. I'm in the process of writing a memoir. I'm sure Marina's had a lot of incredible conversations that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And we're also working on, continuing to raise a ruckus and make some noise, through a campaign that we've recently launched. And so, my hope and path forward is really just to keep meeting each item as it comes forward, and taking it for what it is, or what it is for me in that moment. Is it the right thing? And so, where the future lies, I don't yet know.
I mean, I'm so grateful for you all just like speaking up, and in the face of everything you have faced. I mentioned to you all earlier, on my mom is one of 6 daughters, or no, 7 daughters, 9 children, 7 girls. And I would say the vast majority have been victims of sexual assault. And it was just stories that I grew up with, and I've never been sexually assaulted, but there was like this generational trauma. And I know for my own mother that she didn't really speak about it until she was much older, and she carried so much shame around it. And, it's just like, I think people don't realize that it's like one time can destroy your entire like sense of being, your sense of security, and that so much of the way out is like people speaking up and connecting to one another. And so I'm just grateful for you all doing that, because the generational trauma is very, very, very real. Even if you aren't a direct victim, if your mother is or your sister is, it's like, it impacts so many around your community.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's absolutely true. And, the family thing is really interesting too. Like, I do believe that everyone's affected by it, if not themselves, certainly somebody that they know. And the shame is so real. My first assault I actually had was when I was 16 years old, and that was one that took decades for me to accept and understand that it was sexual assault. There was no question about it, but other than my internal dialogue. And I think one thing that even highlights the shame further, at least in my own story, is that this is a conversation I still have not had with my parents to this day. They don't know about the assaults. They don't know the fight that I'm fighting. And it creates divides. And I also think it speaks to the complexity of it, not just the complexity of the topic, but how quickly it leads into, the work that you guys do in the social justice space around politics, people's belief in our justice system, how policing is handled, patriarchy, marriage, roles and responsibilities. It gets complicated quickly. And so all of those things are alive and part of the dialogue. They eventually, become part of the dialogue when you get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely do. And I get really emotional when talking about, how much it affects family members, because I've directly seen the impact it's taken on my mom. The amount that she still worries about me to this day. Because, it got pretty dark there with my trauma for a while. And so she worries about me so much, and I see how much it affects her all the time, that her daughter had to go through that. And but then she's also my biggest fan in all of this, and is at she'll literally try to come to interviews, and I'm like, you don't need to come to this interview. It's okay.
She could have come to this one.
Exactly. Yeah. And just, she's ready to hop in the car and drive 3 hours for anything that we have going on. So yeah, it really affects the whole family though.
Yeah. I feel like I could talk to you guys forever about all sorts of contributing factors. As Christina and I and Muna are all raising sons, and I think that there is a way that we have raised our boys for so long with such limited permission to feel in this society that contributes directly to sexual assault, and the way that this has all gone with patriarchy, and who is believed and who is asking questions and who is carrying shame. And I would love to spend a little time imagining with you two what it would look like if the culture met you in the work to commit to raising boys differently, while we are committing to reforming systems and fighting against systems. Might that be the thing that actually gives us a different sort of world?
Yeah, that's important, right? Like, I too am raising a boy. And, I think the thing that has been most important for me is really around this dialogue of consent. Mm-hmm. And that's, you teach, it starts at a young age, whether it's hugs or, it doesn't have to be about sexual assault, but that's when we learn proper boundaries. I'm struggling a little bit actually in raising a 4-year-old boy. It's a lot of energy because he's high energy and loves to be aggressive. And him and dad love to play fight. And so a lot of times I don't want to get hit though. And he'll come up, play fight with me. And so that's the whole dialogue now where I'm like, did you guys both agree to fight? Did you consent to fight? Because I don't want to get hit later. Because for a while I was like, stop hitting. And then it's really though about this dialogue of, consent and what are we okay with, and what I'm okay with is not what the next person's okay with. And that dialogue absolutely has to start when they're young, because it is so layered, especially in the world of sexual assault, when you start to realize how many of these are born out of situations with grooming or with people they know. And, it gets very complicated. But those dialogues have to start early.
And like you said, it's not the consent conversations aren't necessarily having anything to do with anything sexual when they're little. It's do you want to hug this person or not?
Right.
You actually get to pick who you hug or who you don't hug.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Guys, Marina, will you tell us about your campaign? Please. I would love everybody listening to be able to follow along and support you guys.
So yes, we recently launched the We Are Amy's Army. And it is, a campaign that right now is focused on getting folks aware of the lawsuit, and ready for June 23rd for our hearing. It is going to be in New Orleans. So while we would love for people to come and rally outside of the courthouse with us there, we also hope that since COVID is still happening, there'll be a live Zoom link that folks can watch and support us from there, and really just get the city more and more aware of this lawsuit and applying more and more pressure to the city.
And what city, Hannah, where should we be thinking about applying pressure in the city?
Well, first of all, to join, you guys can go to For Amy Smith on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Is it for spelled out or?
Yes.
No, FOR.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
FOR.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not the number 4.
We'll put links up.
Yeah, FOR. There you go. Yeah, perfect. No, that's great. And so, we are trying to bring awareness to the problem, of which the lawsuit and what we're going through is a key component, at least between now and June 23rd. And, the pressure can be felt and be put on city council, our district attorney's office. But I think if we can continue to get as many followers into the campaign, that's where we can do some joint messaging. Like Marina said, we are hoping to get some folks rallied behind the effort, and do a number of things to really get some community engagement that we'll be messaging through those avenues. And then, the hope is that there will be a conclusion to the lawsuit. And after that fact, there's still more work that needs to be done, quite frankly. So I guess I want to articulate that the campaign isn't intended to end when the lawsuit ends. It's about much bigger and broader, opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
And who is Amy Smith?
Great question. Go ahead.
So Amy Smith is the first plaintiff in the lawsuit. It is her pseudonym. So our lawsuit is titled Amy Smith versus, but Amy Smith is also just a common pseudonym that they do give to, rape survivors across the nation. When, you're terrified and you're sitting in that room with the detective and they say, do you want to use your name or do you want to use a pseudonym? You're so traumatized, you can't think of a name. How are you supposed to think of a pseudonym? And so they put Amy Smith down a lot of times. So while it is representing, our own case, our very real case with our own Amy Smith, it represents so many Amy Smiths out there.
Well, thank you both for having the courage to share your stories, to come and share them with folks that are listening so that people understand. Like, I think people think of Austin as a very liberal city where something like this couldn't happen. And you all had the courage to expose it. And there's already been so many stories written about what you all have done. And so I really do believe that the organizing work, the sacrifice, speaking about mothers sacrificing, like, I wish you didn't have to make the sacrifice. I wish you didn't have to have the courage to, after all of the trauma you face an entire system. But I think it will make other people's lives better down the road. So I know it's named after Amy Smith, right? The kind of unknown name, but it's the unknown name of so many people that I think later down the road will be able to have not face the level of trauma that you all have faced. So thank you.
And thank you for your tirelessness in pursuing this, because I have participated at some points, but you have been consistent. You have not stopped. You can't stop your commitment to it. And I have watched you just be tireless in your pursuit of justice, and that makes this whole world better. Whether the system responds right now or through our continued pushing, the things that you are doing make lives better in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
it matters. It's worth it.
I mean, to be honest, like how, given all that they have been through and what they have to go through all of the time to continue to tell this story, to continue to be the face of this lawsuit, and to continue to rail against and try to change a system that literally is constructed to not deliver justice for them. I'm so pissed off. It just pisses me off. There's nothing else except a white hot rage in reaction to what they have to go through to do what they're doing. After already having been victimized, and 2 in 5 women in this state will experience that. And they will experience being written off and silenced and shamed and put aside unless they fight, and they shouldn't have to, because not everybody can. How can they?
Yeah, and they shouldn't have to fight. And I'm so grateful at the same time for their courage, their conviction. I mean, like, I think, everyone knows someone that's a survivor of sexual assault. And even if you think you don't know, you do know.
You do, yeah.
And if you definitely do know, you know how traumatic it is. Like, people carry around that pain, that unjust shame. I say unjust because they shouldn't have to have any shame, but they do. So many people. And then so many people understandably don't want to come forward. So then you come forward, and the double trauma of then the police not thoroughly investigating it, the prosecution not prosecuting it, or choosing not to. I mean, just like, that is so outrageous. You and I were talking before the show that, like, I had read about how our country even came to see rape as a violent crime, that it took women organizing because it wasn't seen as a violent crime. And so we've made the step
Right.
seen as a violent crime. But look, if it's a violent crime that threatens the safety, the health of like our community members, then it has to be investigated and held to account as such. And they just haven't been doing that for years. And just like, it blows my mind that they weren't doing that in Austin for years.
And to the extent that of this over 700 rapes that were reported. Now that's a fraction of what actually happened, but the reported in 2017 in Austin, there was a single prosecution, and the rape victim was a man, and that was it. And that is in this supposed bastion of like safety, and progressivism, and we have to pull the curtain back on these stories so we can live in reality. Because the story that we're being told is not the reality that we live in.
I just think about, like, for you and me and our kids, like, we want our kids to feel safe. And I'm just thinking about these women and like the sense of protection you seek, like when you are violated in a like inimaginable way, in the cruel and intimate way to be violated, your safety, your sense of self, like your body, all of that.
Your body is the crime scene.
And then, and then to then go and report it and seek safety and refuge and then not get that at all. So I am so grateful for these women to have the courage that they do. But again, I just wish they didn't even have to do it. But I think for us, for folks that aren't survivors, like you said, consider us all part of the Army to support.
Hell yeah.
Right? That's exactly our job. Whether you're a victim or survivor or not, it's your job to stand up with these women, especially if you are men.
Especially. So check out foramysmith.com and follow these brave women and their journey to justice.
For all of us.
For all of us.